justice, racism, trans lives. I won't go no further other than to say let's keep. There's a lot of language that's being erased right now. Let's keep it alive, everyone. Okay. Another thing I will do, as always, I want to encourage you all to silence your cell phones for the reading. But when you turn them back on, I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to download the app 5 Calls. Has anybody heard of the app 5 Calls? It's an open source volunteer app. And essentially, it is an app that allows you to type in your address, and it will automatically populate you with the contact information for your local, state, and federal representatives. And you can, with the tap of a button, call them at your leisure. This is one of the most effective ways to make a difference on any issue you care about. More effective than an Instagram post, more effective than, I'm not sure if it's more effective than okay, I'm not going to go there. But there's some other effective ways. But you can also call your representative, and it will pull up for you issue briefs on any number of issues that you care about. Maybe you care about federal parks. Maybe you care about the Department of Education. Maybe you care about not arresting student protesters, right? So anything that you care about, whatever that is, this app, 5 Calls, will let you sort of just, with a touch of a button, contact your representative. So when you turn your cell phone back on, download that app. Lastly, I will say, today it's One Day, One SMC, which is the annual fundraising campaign for so many different wonderful programs here on campus. I want to just remind you that our Visiting Writers series is largely administered, run, executed by amazing graduate student assistants who are beneficiaries of the MFA Scholarship Fund. So if you or someone you know loves the Visiting Writers series, a great way to engage with that is through the One Day, One SMC campaign happening for the next 1,868 minutes or however long it's happening for. So with those reminders, just wanted to, again, thank you all for being here, especially on this somewhat rainy day. We're so excited to welcome somebody who's just so close to the heart of our community here, Rachel Richardson, who will be reading from Smother, available for sale back there in the corner after the reading. So don't forget to pick up a copy if you haven't already. But without further ado, I would like to invite up here Issa Malouf, who will give Rachel a more full and robust introduction.
Good afternoon. My name is Issa Malouf. I'm a second-year poet in the MFA program, and I am very excited to be introducing today's visiting writer, Rachel Richardson. For many of us here, Rachel needs no introduction. We are extremely lucky to have her in our community. She has been a core presence in the faculty for my almost 2 years here. And while we are gathered today to celebrate and hopefully dive deep into her new book, I want to first say what a very, very fine teacher she is. I have taken 2 classes with Rachel, including workshop, here at SMC, as well as another class in 2020, of all sensitive times, through Left Margin Lit, a literary arts center in Berkeley, of which she is a co-founder. Please check out Left Margin Lit. There are always a lot of great workshops in all genres going on there, both online and in person. Rachel is an outstanding poet, a recipient of fellowships through the National Endowment of the Arts and the Wallace Stegner Fellowship at Stanford University, winner of the Hopwood Award at the University of Michigan, and several Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Prizes. She's been published in The Atlantic, American Poetry Review, the Poetry Foundation, and many more. She holds not only an MFA from the University of Michigan, but an MA in folklore from the University of North Carolina. And she has written 3 excellent books. Smother, her most recent book, which just came out from Norton, for sale in the back, 100-Year Wave, and I recently read Copperhead, her first book, and what a fantastic first book that is. I love its music, its mystery, its finely tuned restraint. To get back to her studies in folklore, Rachel's work has a signature ability to launch itself from the field note, a keen attunement to place, including the quotidian, what was once thought of as the domestic, and then draw acute and disturbing connections and disjunctions with the overarching cultural myths and the capital H histories that ask no permission, but seep and permeate us to our core. A toggling between the everyday and heroic frames, which allows her to bring a sharp, observational eye to things like technology, patriarchy, the long arm of fire season, and its hovering omnipresence, that have become so ubiquitous, we struggle to map them on our lives. The at times long, slow emergency of these shaping forces. But because Rachel also writes straight into the heart of what was once thought to be artistic suicide, parenting, and motherhood, her work fiercely takes up the care and responsibility of the world around us. This is one of those great paradoxes of parenthood, that somehow it is also a personal seismic shift into taking collective responsibility, as if the lasting legacy is not the parent, but the planet itself. And so what we see in this new book, Smother, is an attention to how we love and grieve and prevail over the forces that shape us, that shape and interrupt our poems themselves. And so, with creative agency in the midst of a burning but gently raining world today, let us please welcome Rachel Richardson.
You know you've gotten a great introduction when you have to take out your pen and take notes on it. I'm like, oh, I did that? I should put that down. That was great. Thank you so much, Isa, for that really thoughtful and generous introduction to my work. Oh, I have something. 1 second. Okay, that is a gift for after. Maybe it actually should go with the book table, but I brought a bunch of lemons from my backyard tree because this is the season also in which the lemons go kind of nuts, and I had like 300 on the tree, and so I had to prune it, and like I got 80 off of it without, you can't even really tell that any have been harvested. So I'm bringing them to you as a gift, as something to share, and in part because as I was thinking about where I spent the years writing this book, and it took me a bunch of years, it was a lot in my backyard. It was a lot in the pandemic, just in that little bit of space where I could have some open air for myself. So this book has become, I mean, to me it feels like a map of the places that I've been, which are California, which are our mountains and our rivers and our bay, and also kind of a like micro map of my house, the rooms in my house and the little spaces that I went to try to find a corner for myself where I could sort of hear myself think, or plant a tree, or do something in kind of my small little movement of opposition against the destruction that felt like it was outside of my space and around us in the world, which was the smoke, the fires, the pandemic, these destructive policies that, you know, kind of put their tentacles all over us. And these were my little sort of acts of resistance. And I hope that if you read this book, you can feel it sort of charting a space. That's one of the things that I want this book to do. I hope it feels like this place where we all live together. One of the things that I was interested in here, too, especially because it's not my first book, and I've sort of explored the depths of the self, you know, for a couple of books now. I've been interested in myself and in my story and in where I come from and who I am. And in this book, I felt a lot less interested in myself as an individual person and more in these public things that we experience together. So I ended up trying to write, I don't think I knew this going into the book, but as I wrote poems, I realized I was trying to write a kind of public poem, a poem that made me deal with this question of like, how do I write about these things that happen to all of us? I mean, they happen to all of us in different ways, but they happen to all of us, right? The pandemic happened to all of us. The smoke from the fires came in over all of us. And that became an interesting question for me. So that's maybe the theme of my reading today. Sort of there's a lot of people in here in this book and in this space that you know, make up the community of this work. So you know, if you have comments or corrections for me later, feel free. These are poems that you'll recognize too as part of your life, I hope. So the first poem is called Creek Fire, which was one of the fires that was burning that gave us the Orange Day. You remember it? In September 9th, 2020, when the sky, you know, did not get blue and the sun did not appear. Creek Fire. The dark comes in on my girl's 10th birthday. Fire bearing crow feathers. No, ash. It comes with its big breath, sun without light. Cold morning in the surrounding counties, everyone blinking, looking around, phones lifted to the horizon. So this program has been so great to me. I have been here for 4 years, almost every semester now, and I feel like it's changed my life in poetry in many ways and my attitude about being in community in poetry. And I have been really lucky to get to teach courses that kind of give that to students as well, a Writer in the World course especially, but that's kind of my ethos about what poetry is and what poetry, how we share it. So I noticed, and I only kind of figured this out as I was finishing this book, that there are a lot of other poets in my poems. And I mention them by name sometimes, or you hear their echoes. And I think that's because, you know, I've come to believe that we all exist in this really, in a conversation, right? And in a room together where I'm learning from the poets who I read, and then I'm sort of speaking back to them, and then speaking to the poets who I'm teaching and who I'm, you know, who are the next generation as well. So in this poem, you will hear, you'll see me in my backyard, and you will hear echoes of two poems that shaped me as a young poet. Robert Frost's Out Out, which if you haven't read it, it's amazing. Blank verse, for those of you who are in my class. We just talked about blank verse. Really great example of a blank verse poem, and also like how a community grieves. And then Elizabeth Bishop's In the Waiting Room, which is another poem about sort of public spaces and how we are alone in our public world. So in both of those, there is a moment where someone gets hurt and they make a noise, and I reference that in here. Domestic. Yesterday, as he was hacking down the passion flower vine, my husband, whom I directed to do this, brutal creature that I have become, destroyer of the purple spiked flower and the fritillary's nectar, who put the power whacker in his hands, its handle bright orange so that it could not get lost in the weeds, its toothed blades heft of gas power in the palm. Yesterday, as he was doing my bidding on a ladder against the house, gently pulling, then buzzing one tendril after another, there was a sudden cry. Not Frost's rueful laugh, not Bishop's O of pain, but the high clucking trill of a mother squirrel as two pink bodies tumbled to the dirt. In the tangle of shorn vines they wriggled and squeaked, hairless, blind, shining as if oiled, as the hidden mother scolded, or so it sounded, even at her most desperate, trilling the repeating alarm. And my husband staggered back from them, hand over mouth, then retreated inside and returned with a box. And I, at my great distance, trowel poised over the blueberry pots, thought of telling him to keep it quiet so the kids wouldn't hear and angle for a pet. I thought of having to bottle feed the things now that they'd have our human smell, of driving them in cross-town traffic to the wildlife rescue, of the inconvenience of their living. While my husband scooped them up in his gentle hands, then climbed the ladder with the box and set them back behind the green curtain of vine, in with the torn warrior's flag they'd made for a bed, up against the warm wall of our house, in the nest for the mother to take them back, and then waited to see if she would have them. Thanks. So I have received a question after reading this poem a few times. Did the squirrels survive? The answer is yes. My husband saved their lives. They ravaged my garden for a year after that. I suppose I'm happy about it. It was a compromise. All right, so speaking of other poets, a form that I love is the cento, which some people call the cento, but I have news to report. So this is a form that was maybe first, I've started researching this after I've written a few of them and started thinking about like, why am I drawn to this form? It's a collage form. It's basically you take a line from other poets, and many lines from other poets, and you collage them together to make your own new poem, right? And so it's a poem that like is a gesture of appreciation to other poets, right? These are the lines that shaped me. These are the lines that that matter to me, that I want to sort of repeat. I feel like the earliest versions of it, they would take lines from only one poet, from Homer or someone, and so it was like, you know, writing your favorite lines in your high school notebook or something. It was like a best of, or greatest hits, you know, kind of thing. But now we take them from lots of different poets, and so it's this collage. However, I think there's a common thinking that because the word cento in Italian means 100, that the cento, this form, comes from Italian. It doesn't, though. I have recently realized that is a attribution. It comes from the Latin, which originally comes from the Greek canton, so I think it's actually kento. I think that's how we should be pronouncing it, but anyway, we will do the Americanized version, cento, but call it whatever you want. It's a fun form, so this poem, Mother Cento, was something that I put together after thinking about how it is artistic suicide to write about motherhood to a lot of people. There are a lot of editors who have said, and I quote one of them in this book, that they just they're not interested in poems about mothers or motherhood. Leave your domestic stuff somewhere else, we want the real art. And so well, that's my whole life. I'm not sure what I would write about then. As someone who just, I live in this position, I have children, I can't just deny that I am that. So I started looking for other people who had written other poems, and this is a really fun exercise, which I give to all of you. If you feel like there's an identity you can't write about, or a thing that you are that feels like awkward, go look for everyone else who has done it, and collage their words together. So this is called Mother Cento, and it made me feel so much better. I was like, well, you can reject me and my mother poem, but are you really going to reject Sylvia Plath and Saeed Jones and Reginald Shepard and Dorian Locks? I have the better party over here. So this is Mother Cento. My mother is a moon out to sea. It's summer, she's tired, no one knows where she's been. I wanted to be a good mother, the mother says. Machine of the mother, white city inside her. Mother, we must take away the phone because who will you call next? My mother would be a falconess. My mother was the clouded overnight a moon swims through. She held the beginning of life. Whatever she was to me, she was the human caught in something she could hardly stand. She got us almost through the high grass, then seemed like she turned around and ran right back in. Okay, here's a poem about the difference between the generations. I feel like generational shifts are happening like every 2 years now instead of every 30 or whatever. The newest technology comes out and I don't get it. Even the difference between my 14-year-old and my 12-year-old. My 12-year-old thinks she's like much more current than the 14-year-old because she knows like the newer slang than the 14-year-old knows. So there's this sort of like very rapid, generational turnover in terms of language, in terms of technology. Where our cell phones are meant to, be obsolete after 2 years, that kind of thing, right? So, and there's always a new social media or new way to communicate. So this was my thinking about, this poem is called Telephone, it's my thinking about the phone and the fact that my children don't really understand, don't have the idea that I have, which is that like a smartphone, the first function was telephone, right? That's like totally, just like an odd little extra to them. They don't think of the phone as like calling someone. It is the source of all the apps, right? So that's a difference between us. I grew up with the kind of phone that you that had the receiver, and you held it to your ear, and it had a cord, and the cord was really fun to twirl. Anybody who lived through the 90s knows this. Telephone. Oh, and there's one other meaning of the telephone, which is the game, right? That you whisper from one person to another around a circle, the kids' game, or adult game, whatever. So this is a poem about those meanings. Telephone. Warm movement on skin, voice brought inside my ear, as if through that cord I used to weave around my index finger, ring finger, across wrists to cuff me to its sound, its intelligible replication of the human voice. The patent, device that can fuse across space when two are too far apart to be heard directly. I twined that cord to my arms, wrapped myself within the sound. Speak, and assemble the parts that bring her, transmitter, receiver, ringer. My daughter, unknower of the telephone, cups her hand against my ear, whispers a sentence, chain I am supposed not to break, but pass unharmed through my body to another ear and across until it comes back to her. Replication, microphone, earphone, delivered unto her body by warm breath fogging the ear. And its mangled arrival, heap of syllables ruptured and bent out of order. Everyone so near and laughing now at how far, how indirectly the replication imagined what she said. That poem was published in the New Overland Review, by the way, an excellent literary magazine that we're so excited to have here as a new resource and venue at St. Mary's. All right, so I like to think, this is maybe why I'm more interested in the public poem now, is that around the time that I had children, I realized I wasn't that original. I was living an experience that was like a really common one, a really universal one. Some of these things just, all babies are kind of the same in some ways. They get certain skills at the same time. They have certain understandings. They can do things, with their eyes, with their bodies. They learn object permanence around the same time. And I realized, we think we're really individual, but there are so many ways in which we're the same. Even my naming my child, I thought I had come up with this beautiful name that no one in my family had ever had, and it was really lovely, and the name was Olivia, and then it was the second most popular name for girls in 2010. So clearly I was not having my own ideas. I was somehow being influenced by all of this around us, the stuff that we live in, right? And I think we all are to a greater extent than we sometimes will acknowledge. So this poem is sort of about that understanding. If I can find it, here it is. Zeitgeist. And then it wasn't just plastic at Gore Point in the Antarctic, population 0, but at 30,000 feet above the Pyrenees, population birds. And in the lungs of every living lunged creature to walk or fly or swim the planet, and still we bought houses in the floodplain, went to the beach when we could. Then it wasn't a story anyone could bear hearing again, not with the smoke and Amazon's delay delivering air purifiers ordered with Prime. The people huddled, looking into their private blue-lit screens, trying to think of what to type that might communicate this leaden grief, the totality of the body's aloneness in which we somehow lived together. And we believed what we believed about who was at fault. And it's true, many things also thrived at this time, for one must take a balanced view. The tick and the jellyfish flourished. And what burned, burned. And what entered our lungs entered them silently, which does not mean without consequence, and then did what it was going to do. That's sort of a bummer, that poem. Here's maybe, I don't know if it's lighter, but it doesn't end quite as sadly. Conservation theory. If you love a forest, you're supposed to live in a small house. Accept your grandmother's hand-me-down sewing rocker instead of snatching up a sectional at the liquidation sale. You need to learn about soil and beetles, heart rot, and the price of lumber in China. Turns out the world is not the silence under a crown of redwoods, not mostly. The builders are always building. Zillow hungers for a listing. Treed lots photographed so beautifully, framing the dappled light. If you want a forest, you should buy the trees. If you want a forest, you should deed them to the conservationists to keep from your descendants' desires. Turns out the price of lumber in China is going up, up, up. It's not productive to love a thing that costs so much to keep in the ground. The loggers are waiting. The local economy is counting on you. You need to lie down in the understory, to burrow and root. A tree party is swallowing smoke. A tree party is reaching toward the sun. A tree party takes years to get the cocktail hour. It's not your fault you loved to run your hand along smooth floorboards as a child. It's not your fault you took the sweet air for granted. Can we look at that? This is amazing. The weather event we're having here, there's like a whole fountain coming over the corner over there. I love all this water that we're getting. I mean, I don't love like walking through it right now, but it's so awesome. And I love the greenness of our winter. So let me read a poem about that a little better, a poem about love. I have in here several poems that are sort of love poems to my friends, to women in particular who have kind of walked through a lot of life with me. And this one is to my friend Julia, who was a wildland firefighter in the summers during college in Oregon. And now she is an environmental lawyer, and she's sticking up for the rights of the salmon and the orca to have undammed rivers and to have clean water and the rights of all of us to have protected land and an ecosystem that we can live in. So I admire her a ton. She does a kind of like physical, active work that I can't do, but I feel like my poetry and her once firefighting, now attorney, defense work are kind of, I hope they're kind of in conversation. Girlfriend poem, Julia. We both stare at the sun, no, below it, into coffee mugs. For you, the fires were the guide. A ridge makes a red line through the night, you told me. It teaches you where you have to go. You'd watch it from your sleeping bag with the boys on the hill, all of you ready to deploy. You called it working fire. You worked fire every summer, and the boys who loved it most became hotshots, parachuting themselves into the flame. Sometimes you'd make out with them on the hillside as you watched its creep. You're mine because our children are elsewhere, whole cities away. You're mine because once we lived almost in each other's bodies, tramping down 18th Street in pajamas. We recorded nothing of that life. Not the sound of the grocery truck unloading, not the heat until we couldn't take any more into our skin. For you, the fires were the guide. For me, language. I tried to grasp, to make a pattern. It teaches you where you have to go. There's too much heat already. Even before breakfast, I have to wear sunglasses in the dining room. We weren't counting miles when we ran together down the windy great highway behind the sand dunes. Remind me I don't need it back. Remind me those green trees, oaks still leafing, don't yet smell like they're burning. Okay, I think I'm gonna end with a poem that I don't normally end with. Just for fun, because you all study poetry, and this is like bingo for poets. This is called Smoke Cento, in which I have taken a bunch of poems that are mostly pretty iconic. Like, I imagine many of you, if you've studied poetry, you've heard these poems, and you probably remember some of them. There's maybe one or two that might be just sort of iconic to me, but most of these are pretty sort of American, like, Northern anthology kind of poetry that you would have encountered, or even, yeah, they're like the sort of big public poems. So what I have done to make this cento is to take the main noun in each of these lines, the main subject, and switch it out. So if it was I, or if it was, let's see. So it's I once, it's the fish once, it's hope once, it's he, and it's Icarus once. So whatever the subject was, I've changed out those words for the word smoke. So you hear the word smoke a bunch of times, and the idea is just to sort of like take our American canon and think about all sort of being in this, under this canopy of smoke together, and how does that sort of change the way we hear and experience our language and our culture. Smoke cento. The smoke wades through black jade. I'll give you, anybody who can name any of these poems, any of these lines of the poems come from, or the poems that the lines come from, extra credit from me later. The smoke wades through black jade. Smoke knows why the caged bird sings. Everyone forgets the smoke also flew. The smoke too sings America. The smoke is elegy to what it signifies. Smoke is the thing with feathers. Smoke loved the earth so much she wanted to stay forever. Smoke diverged in a yellow wood. Smoke kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow. But I know too that the smoke is involved in what I know. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for that. That was wonderful. Okay, I'd like to get right to it and talk about the dominatrix mommy, the dom mom, if you will. You didn't read Smother, which I was disappointed because it shows up a lot in that poem, but also in Domestic. It's a delicious voice. I feel like she's a facet of this mythic mother figure, but rather than call it maternal ambivalence, we might call her the dark feminine or the shadow feminine. Right now in astrology, we're seeing this huge surge of interest in Black Moon Lilith, which is a point that is meant to represent this uncontrollable or wild side of nature. And it's in all of our charts. And literally, it is measured by charting the furthest point away in the moon's elliptical. The moon, of course, represents the feminine and emotions. So this is the moon's apogee. You can't see it, but it's there. And of course, Lilith, according to Jewish folklore, was Adam's first wife, the one who wouldn't submit and who was exiled from the Garden of Eden. So my question is, can you trace for us the emergence of this voice as a process, an uncovering, a self-discovery for you? And or do you think there's something about these times especially that is calling her out?
Yes and yes. That's an interesting question, or an interesting discussion of the subject too. So maybe I didn't read from Smother the title poem here, which is right in the middle of this book as a long poem, because I did it, I think, in my reading last year a little bit, and I thought I would try something else, but also because I'm giving 2 readings in a row here, and I thought maybe I'll save a little bit of that for tomorrow, I don't know, although we'll see. But I could read like a little section in case people don't know what we're talking about. So yeah, the central poem is, and maybe I'll say a little bit about how I put it together too before I read it. So mostly I write fairly, in a fairly linear way, like I begin at the beginning and I try to keep going. And then I will move things around if I need to later. But basically a draft goes for me from like a first line or a first idea, a first image to some kind of an ending. And then I revise within whatever I've made there, or sometimes I will add on to it or whatever. But there's like kind of a linear arc. This poem did not happen for me that way at all. I started having these lines come to me in about 2020 about smoke and about motherhood, that were these kind of like critiques of moms and of myself as a mother. They're sort of like, you're supposed to be able to do it in this way. You're supposed to be able to occupy this role of motherhood without complaining and perfectly all the time. I mean, I think there's a sort of societal idea that mothers should, be able to like accomplish all of these things and then not ask for credit for any of them, or not even be seen for doing them, but hold up a lot of like the societal labor and emotional kind of need. And so I started like hearing these like dictated ideas of what mothers should do or what mothers should be able to do. And I started finding that voice kind of funny and interesting just because it's so ridiculous. And I changed all of the word mother to the word smoke throughout. And so the smoke became this sort of persona of like the idealized, impossible mother, who also becomes like a bully and a nemesis. And so I started writing a bunch of lines. I ended up cutting them all. I wrote like 20 pages of these. I cut them all up. I put them all over the floor, and then I just sort of grouped them. And it was a collage of its own. And had a lot of fun thinking about like how do you develop a character. So it was maybe more like a fiction writer's exercise than a poet in that way. Although then I was going for like what sounds go well together. Anyway, here's a little bit of it. The smoke writes her novels in the bath. She's cool with school lunch. Her Twitter is a thing of beauty. Her kids are her inspiration. The smoke cherishes each moment. She doesn't nag about people leaving the lights on. She just steps over the shoes by the door. The smoke is a statue. She's the life of the party. The smoke gets it all done and is happily exhausted in the evening. She can laugh at that joke. Exhausted. The smoke didn't have to leave home to write about it. And then my favorite part, really, because it's the MFA students joke, is the smoke has heard it all before. When given the option, she'll take the stairs. She gets 10,000 steps before most people are awake. She's never been tired a day in her life. The smoke was bored with the adjunct track, so she went and got an MBA. Who gets to transform is a material concern, but it's also a question of attitude. When people say she has boss energy, they're talking about the smoke. Okay, so you get the idea. It's very fun to be able to write in the voice of someone who does not care what people think of her. It wasn't even in her voice, right? I'm writing about her. I'm not writing in the first person, but to write about somebody who does not care and who believes that they have more power within them than anyone who might judge them or might try to sort of confine them to some kind of a type or a rule. So yeah, that became a really fun project for me. I think also I'm tired of, for myself, and actually maybe in general in poetics, this sort of like beautiful, sorrowful poem that is so much of poetry, so much of contemporary poetry, and I think was a lot of my early poetry too, is like really trying to write something beautiful and sorrowful. But there's also funny, right? And there's also angry, and there are so many other emotions to have, and beauty, or sort of awe and sorrow are not the only two that we should have access to, or that are deserving of poems. And so, actually this poem really began, the poem Smother, because my daughter said one of these lines to me. I had written it down on a scrap of paper, and this is in COVID where we have no school and I have no private space, whatever, so all my stuff is like out there for everybody to see, and my kids have comments on what I'm doing, and I think I have no privacy. And so I'm like writing, lines as they come to me while we're like homeschooling. And so I had this like line on a scrap of paper that I thought was sort of a throwaway, also just like sort of silly melodramatic line, which was "The smoke has no lover." It sort of came to me out of thin air. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to do with it, but I wrote it down, and my daughter, who was 8 at the time, saw this and turned to me and said it out loud in this tone, "The smoke has no lover." That like made me realize, oh, this whole thing is a satire. Like I could write something really funny and really angry and really like anything I want it to be, because I don't have to be serious all the time. So that sort of freed me to write that poem, and also opened me up to some of the fact that there's some of that feeling, what did you call it, Black Lilith?
Black Moon Lilith.
Black Moon Lilith. There is a current of anger under a lot of this, right? Under a lot of that sense of being in a role that people say is not worthy of being talked about. In a role that, and that is like maybe considered socially valuable, but also is like really treated as, not worthy of like intellect, not like, not empowered on its own, like it has to be sort of protected by someone else. I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of all of those things, and I realized it was limiting my writing too. So that's where that current, I think, comes from, and it felt very necessary to the book.
It was limiting your writing to the beautiful and the sorrowful.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's something.
Which is, I think, why people say they don't like poems about motherhood. Because it's like, it's not that, I think, so the epigraph to my book is, some of you know, that by this quite powerful editor in the kind of New York publishing world, who said at a publishing Q&A that I was at 15 years ago that he automatically rejected any poem with the word mother in it. And because I thought about that quote a long time, like, why do you hate mothers? But it's not that, I don't think. It's that he thought it was shorthand for sentimentality and cliche and not real thinking. Which I think is the opposite of that. I think there's so much messy, interesting stuff in the experience of mothering, in the fact of having a mother, and it's also like a pretty central part of most of our human experience, right? To have had some interaction with mothers, right? Whether you are one or not, whether you ever will be one, you might have had one. There are other people in mothering roles in our lives. It's part of kind of the human reproductive project, and so it just seems like hilarious to dismiss it as unworthy of inquiry.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure that I leave time for the questions from the audience. I did have a question here, just really recognizing this rich use of form in the book, and I just want to say that for me it really drew new relationships between sort of how form and relationship making can work together, especially in the way that the form reflects your hunger, or the word solace is coming up a lot in workshop this semester, how you found that through these really difficult times that you're writing about in 2020 and in the fires, and then how they sort of get mapped out through the different and sort of like creative uses of form in the book. And so I'm thinking about the girlfriend poems and all that. So I had a question about that, but I want to make sure that we have time. So let me ask this question. Many of my fellow grad students here are working or thinking about working on our first books. And I'm wondering if you could travel back to when you were writing your first book. Do you have any cautionary tales or wishes or wisdom that you might share with yourself if you could talk to her from the future?
I mean, I was cautioned in my first book not to write about the South and not to write about whiteness, and I did both those things. And I was cautioned later not to write about parenthood and babies, and I did both those things. You know, I think I have always, whenever I've been told don't write about a thing, well, I am, I guess, a little oppositional. I just go right for it. But like
that's the dark moon, Lilith.
The advice in it really is your subjects choose you, and do not deny them. Let your subjects be your subjects. It doesn't matter what anyone else is saying. You will find your way to it. And if they're saying don't write about it, or you have no right to that material, or it is toxic material or whatever, all the more reason to figure out the way to say the thing. If it feels necessary to you, you have to do it. I really had a lot of fuel in this book from the idea that I was not supposed to do it, and the idea that people thought it could not be interesting. That was a big motivator to me. It's like, well, why not? And also, how can I prove that wrong? You know. And yeah, so I would. That's my primary advice. Is, you know, your subjects are your subjects, and the more you resist them, the less of the real writing you're going to be doing. The rest of your own work, you know, the work that you need to be doing, and that's painful and difficult. That's like a bottling up of a self, you know. And so, don't do it. Let yourself, let yourself have the things that have called you, and find the ways that you can own them or share in them. I used to worry a lot about ownership of subjects, like, is it my right to write about this thing, you know? And I think now much more, much less about that kind of relationship, like ownership and subject and owner, and more about like community, like who do I want to be speaking to, who am I speaking from, you know, back to in time, who gave me that sort of like through reading and through teaching, who gave me the permission and the sort of opening to add to the conversation. I see it much less as a sort of like maybe sort of capitalist model of like the owner and the object, and more of the socialist, like we share in the negotiation of stories, and maybe now more than ever, I feel like stories are the ways that we work out like who we are as humans and what humanity is for and why we're worth being here and worth working for on this planet. And I think we have to tell the most compelling story we can. And also value language, because language is the way that humans have learned everything we've learned in like our evolution. We've passed it through language. That is our tool, and I think to value it and to preserve it by using it well is a really powerful and important practice. So I guess to get back to the first book question, sorry, I'm taking a long route around it, but you know, I think I worried a lot about whether I was good enough, whether I was the right person to tell the thing, whether, you know, sort of what if I was doing it right for someone else, and I don't think that's the best use of our time. You know, I think it is a better use of our time to say, this is the thing I am drawn to do. How can I explore, you know, the best ways to express? I think you will find your ways, and you will then create the space for yourself.
I love that advice, and yet it's so hard. I mean, I think that we're, at least when I think of myself and also some of my fellow poets, we're all sitting on these stories which are like really, they're powerful in their destructive energy, in what harm we could do, in all the ways that we could go wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have that restraint. That's why we have that fear. And I think we're all just trying to like figure out, you know, we try it and then it goes wrong. Was there something, you know, was there something that you came back to when you were writing about those things that you weren't supposed to be writing about, you know, about the South, about whiteness, about, you know, was there something from your life or your training or your instinct that you just, you know, that helped you get through to that way that you told it, that you told those stories, and that somehow they came out, like I said, I read Copperhead, they have this incredible restraint and yet mystery to them. And so you found your way through that difficult material, and I just wonder if you have anything that you could tell those of us who are frustrated or feeling really vulnerable about you know, really these volcanoes we're sitting on, you know.
But if you think about the stories that you love the most, the books that you love the most, the poems, the short stories, the novels, even like movies and stuff, it's often, the awe at them is often someone saying the thing that you thought was unsayable, right? Or that you thought was such dangerous material, and yet they go right for it. And they are able to change the way that we see, and increase our empathy, right? And like sort of add to our ability to feel. When you're asking that question, I think we feel a lot of caution in general about doing and saying the wrong thing, which is part of it. And workshop, I think, can sometimes exacerbate that sense, especially when you have like 12 different people in the room who might have all different opinions about what you shouldn't be saying, you know, or how you're saying it wrong. But I also think, in my own experience of being critiqued, and I was, I think that it's a gift to be told it's not working, even it offends me, because if that person will talk to you more about it, because it tells you you're not yet making that communication. You're not yet doing it all the way. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you haven't done it in a way that's going to work for an audience yet. And I mean, I had very difficult conversations about some of my poems, especially in that first book, around the subject of race. and they made the poems better. And I didn't retreat from the subject, but I had to like come around at it a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways in order to really think through, what felt like, I don't know, my own most, the truest thing I could say and the thing that I would defend, the thing that I was willing to be critiqued for, and, I also, I tell a lot of stories in my poems. I don't know if you haven't pointed that out in particular, but I think we've talked about it. And I taught the narrative impulse class in the fall because it's something I'm really interested in. I think that stories, I don't really want to be misunderstood. I think that's the danger sometimes, is that poems, especially if they exist in like an entirely lyric plane, can be taken out of context and can be misconstrued. And there are so many ways outside of creative writing in which people intentionally twist our language, or twist language, not ours, but twist political language and stuff to mean something it doesn't mean, to completely distort, and ultimately to like try to like to try to keep us from having meaning at all, right? Trying to like keep anyone from believing that there's any truth, that there's anything that like actually is what it means, or means what it says. And so I think that sort of, I lean into like concrete story, concrete image, and then a really clear sense of self, because I am not trying to be authoritative on anything, but I am trying to say, here is where I have stood, and this is the lens through which I can see. And that's all I have, right? It's just one of the many, right? And you all have your own like alternative lens on this same room, right? We see the same place, but from all these different positions. And I intend to be, humble in that sense of being one of the many voices rather than like the voice. I think that's part of the approach then too that I found works better when you try to sort of just speak from on high without having a self or without having a story. People are much more likely to object because there is not only one way, right, or only one version.
Thank you. I think it would be great to hear from the audience. Would anybody like to ask a question? Does anyone have a question?
So, Rachel, in this conversation, you've spoken a lot about place, and that makes me think of Gwendolyn Brooks's sonnet, First Fight Then Fiddle, where she writes, one essentially needs to civilize a space before one can play one's violin with grace. And you've spoken quite movingly about about the necessity of protecting our space. Even though I might not like this particular word choice in Brooks's sonnet, civilizing it. So I guess my question is, what comes after the fight?
Wait, give me more.
Okay.
The fight to civilize the space, to make our art.
Yes. Or to make the world safe for our art, for instance.
What comes next?
Yes.
I would love to be at that point. I don't know. I think we need to have the fight first. I think we're very far from being a culture that listens to language, right? And that is slow enough to, those of you who are studying poetry, you know what the poetry publishing landscape looks like. We do not sell tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of copies of our books. There is a small number of people who pays attention in that way, and who will sit there to create, to come to the language slowly, to listen to it as music, right? I like that Brooks quote that you're using for this. Like, it takes an audience approaching in the right way to be able to even see or hear what is there, right? And I don't think we have that societally right now as a value, or as even, there just isn't enough quiet, there isn't enough slowness. We're in a society that's really fast-paced and really productivity-oriented and contentious, and loves to not actually listen to language, or not actually think it's important. We call language content. We don't listen to it as language, right? Language is also music, language is story. So what comes after? I don't know, lots of poetry. A place where we have a lot of art. I don't know, do you have an answer to that?
I'm trying to find one.
Yeah.
So I
think we want to create that world, right? Like, that's what we're trying to do, is to create a place where art exists, where which is also a place of human empathy, and a place of human receptiveness to others, to sound, to music.
Anybody else?
I can speak.
Yeah.
At the start, you were talking about your book. I'm just going to ask the question you asked. You said you were thinking in writing Smother about how do you write about the things that happen to all of us. I was just curious if you wound up coming away with any advice or a thought process around that.
Yeah, it's still a question for me. Someone who is a better literary critic can tell me what I decided about that if they read my book. But as an artist, really, I think I don't know what I'm doing much of the time, right? I just feel around in the dark and end up somewhere. The centos, I didn't know why I was writing them. I thought it was just fun writing exercise. I didn't really think about how it is actually an argument against, this sort of monolithic idea of motherhood as boring and cliche. And and also of human experience and the sort of authorial experience as singular and authoritative, and instead it could be sort of collaborative and collective. I didn't think those things, but I started writing centos, and then in the end I found, I guess I think those things, because this is the form I've gone to. And so, I guess the ways that we write about public experience, collective experience, well, it's a thesis that I want to explore this semester with my undergraduate class. We're about to do a unit on public poems, and I want to think about exactly how do we do that? How do we write the public poem that feels like it's not just sort of the nationalist dribble or something, or the slogan, or the protest sign. How does it feel like it comes from a singular voice and yet it speaks to something that's much larger than the singular self? I always feel like there's a limit to what's interesting about the self, because the self exists in the world, and so you have to be interested in the world too. And I've just moved farther and farther towards my main interest being out there rather than from here to a little bit out there. And there's beautiful art that is made in that whole spectrum between me and the world, but I think I'm sort of sitting over here right now in terms of the things that I'm most interested in. I just started studying fire a lot too. I realized there's so many interesting things that are happening. Scary things too, right? Things that are problematic. There's I got very focused on first, like, the news feed, the political stuff that was coming in, and that was sort of terrorizing for a while. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna focus on my garden, and I'm gonna focus on, learn a lot about tree planting. And then, but there's like so many things to learn and focus on in the world that I think part of it was just sort of a natural movement. It's like, well, I just sit at home all day, so I don't actually have a story to tell right now, but I can say a lot about trees, or I can say a lot about like this fire that went on for 14 months before being fully put out. Like these are shocking and surprising things and fascinating things that like attract my attention, and then I can think about sort of myself in reference to those things. I'm one small part of it, and I'm clearly like the only set of eyes and perspective that I have on the thing, so that's how the self is involved in it. But I'm looking at the thing out there. That's where I find the interest. So I actually think it's a fun exercise too to take a subject, like to share a subject with other people, right? Speaking of ownership, it's like, I don't own writing about Louisiana. I don't own writing about, the California fires. I tried those things, and also they're owned by all of you. Well, I don't know if you all own Louisiana, but like, if you have family there, maybe you own it the way I do. But you have experienced the fires because you lived here too. And so, like, I would love to see, what's your take on the Caldor Fire? And, we write 20 poems about that. We're gonna get 20 really different poems that all together make a kind of interesting collage. So, that's exciting to me, the fact that there's so many different angles on this sort of shared experience.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Books are for sale in the back. And just thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you for being here.